My 27-year-old husband, 28-year-old, is clearly not the favorite child of my mother-in-law, 54-year-old. She has 3 sons and my husband is the oldest and only one not from her current husband. She separated from his father while she was pregnant and shortly after this met her current husband. After a while, they became parents to both my husband's younger brothers. They are 6 and 4 years younger than my husband. The relationship between my husband and mother-in-law is not really bad. She's not evil or trying to hurt him, but she just isn't very affectionate towards him. All 3 of them moved away for university, and my mother-in-law sends packages of sweets, clothing, or something like this to his younger brothers. My husband never received a package with the exception of his birthday. His brother got a brand new iPhone, 2 expensive pullovers, and 1 perfume for his last birthday. Similar to the other brother, and I would guess most of the times for their birthday, it's something in this price range. She writes a nice card or a personal letter for them, and sometimes bakes something like cookies as well. My husband is sad every year. It's not about the money, but 2 years ago, he got a €40 gift card for an online shop, sent via the online shop. I tried to talk to him about it, but he's so hurt that he doesn't want to talk about it. I waited a few weeks and tried to talk to him again, but he refused. Last birthday, I gifted him a little vacation and texted my mother-in-law that she could gift him a tour for one of the museums he wanted to see there. He dreamt of going to this city for years. It would have not been expensive, but thoughtful, and would probably have made my husband happy. She said she already had something. It was a candle, he's not very into candles, and a shower gel. This year, a package arrived 2 days before his birthday. It was small, and I could see that it came straight from an online shop. We weren't at home, and our neighbor took it. When I came home, my neighbor told me that I'm lucky to see him because he's away for the weekend and we would have missed the package. I just knew it would hurt my husband. I asked him if he could keep the package a little longer so my husband would get it after his birthday because it's probably something disappointing from my mother-in-law. He laughed and agreed. One day before his birthday, I told him the package from his mom arrived, but our neighbor was out of town. He had a great birthday, full of friends, lovely cake and gifts, and didn't think about it one time. Our neighbor gave it to him yesterday and made a joke that his dad is also bad at picking gifts. My husband got curious and asked him about his words, and my neighbor told him everything. He talked to me while his brother, who was there for the party and stays with us for the week, was present, and said he understood it. His brother told my mother-in-law, who is now furious with me. She texted me, and the group chat of his family lit up. She said that I'm mean and spoiled and had no right to hide the gift. So am I the a-hole? To add, his brothers never said anything about the different presents. Now his brother said that he found it harsh for me to hide a present. My husband is older, and apparently that's why it's justified to not get expensive or thoughtful gifts. Funny enough, we are nearly 10 years together, and he never got a good present even as he was the same age his brothers are. One of his brothers also works like him, so it's not the job that makes the difference. Now for an update. Thank you for all the messages. I wrote in the family group chat a good mixture of what you all said. That I was just trying to save my husband's birthday because he's been sad for years because of his presents that do not match the energy of his brothers. And it's not about money, but about thought. I listed everything he got versus everything his brothers got. In return, I got thrown out of the group chat. My husband left the chat after that. My mother-in-law wrote me in private that I'm a toxic person who destroys my husband's relationship with his family, but we choose to ignore that and go low contact for a while. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. She texted me and the group chat of his family lit up. She said that I'm mean and spoiled and had no right to hide the gift. I read in your comments that your husband doesn't want you stirring the pot, but I'd argue that the pot has already been stirred when mother-in-law tried to call you out in the group chat. Comment 2, not the idiot, and you should probably put the same effort into her gifts as she puts into his. I'm thinking an oil funnel from the local gas station would be an appropriate and oh-so-practical gift. If you're feeling particularly magnanimous, toss in a quart of motor oil too. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support and advice. So after we decided to go low contact with my mother-in-law, things were pretty quiet for a few days. My husband seemed to be in a better mood, and we were both relieved to have some space. But then something unexpected happened. My husband's youngest brother, who had been staying with us, decided to have a heart-to-heart with my husband. He admitted that he had always felt a bit guilty about the disparity in how their mother treated them, but never knew how to bring it up. This was a huge moment for my husband because it was the first time anyone in his family acknowledged his feelings. They talked for hours, and it was like a weight had been lifted off my husband's shoulders. His brother even apologized for not standing up for him sooner. This conversation seemed to bring them closer, and for the first time my husband felt like he had an ally in his family. But before I get into what happened next, let me tell you about something that came up during their conversation. My husband's brother mentioned that their mother had always been a bit distant with him too, but not to the same extent. He revealed that their mother had once told him that she felt guilty about how things ended with my husband's father, and that she sometimes found it hard to connect with my husband because he reminded her of that difficult time in her life. This was a revelation for my husband, and it made him see his mother in a slightly different light. A few days later, my husband decided to reach out to his middle brother to see if he felt the same way. Surprisingly, his middle brother was more defensive of their mother. He insisted that she loved all her children equally and that my husband was just being overly sensitive. This conversation didn't go as well, and it left my husband feeling a bit disheartened. It was clear that not everyone in the family saw things the same way. Then out of the blue, my mother-in-law sent a long email to my husband. She apologized for the way she had treated him over the years and admitted that she had been unfair. She explained that she had always struggled with guilt and regret over her past and that it had affected her relationship with him. She said she wanted to make things right and asked if they could meet to talk things over. My husband was torn. On one hand, he had been waiting for this acknowledgement for years. On the other hand, he was still hurt and didn't know if he was ready to forgive her. We talked about it for hours, and he finally decided to meet her. He said he needed closure, one way or another. They met at a cafe, and my husband said it was one of the most emotional conversations he'd ever had. His mother was genuinely remorseful, and for the first time, she listened to him without getting defensive. She admitted that she had been wrong and that she wanted to do better. My husband told her how much her actions had hurt him and how he had always felt like an outsider in his own family. They both cried, and by the end of the conversation, my husband felt a sense of relief. But here's where the twist comes in. While my husband was willing to forgive his mother, he wasn't ready to fully reconcile. He told her that he needed time and that he wanted to keep some distance for now. His mother was disappointed, but said she understood. She promised to give him the space he needed and to work on being a better mother. In the days that followed, my husband seemed more at peace. He said he felt like a huge burden had been lifted off his shoulders. However, the situation with his middle brother remained strained. They hadn't spoken since their last conversation, and my husband wasn't sure if they ever would. It was a bittersweet outcome. He had made progress with his mother and youngest brother, but still felt a rift with his middle brother. As for me, I've been trying to support my husband as best as I can. I've also been reflecting on my own actions and how they've affected the family dynamics. I don't regret hiding the package because it led to some much-needed conversations, but I do wish things had played out differently. One thing that came up during all these conversations was a story from my husband's childhood. He remembered a time when he was about 8 years old and his mother had promised to take him to a theme park. He was so excited and talked about it for weeks. But on the day they were supposed to go, she canceled at the last minute because his stepfather wanted to do something else. My husband was heartbroken, and it was one of the first times he felt like he didn't matter as much as his brothers. This memory had stayed with him all these years and was a big part of why he felt so hurt by his mother's actions. In the end, we're taking things one day at a time. My husband is focusing on his own well-being and trying to rebuild his relationship with his youngest brother. He's also considering therapy to help him work through his feelings. As for his mother, she's been sending occasional messages to check in, but she's respecting his need for space. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for calling my coworker, my work sister, and getting reported to HRI? 34-year-old male, work in a small office, and we have about 30 people working here. Mary, 35-year-old female, is one of my coworkers. We have been working together for 6 years now. We have 6 people in our department, and we have to frequently travel across the state as our work involves overseeing government projects. We always travel in a group of 2. Although my travel partner changes based on the project, Mary and I are generally put on similar projects and enjoy each other's company. My wife also likes Mary. Overall, we have a very healthy work relationship. On to the incident. Yesterday, we had a happy hour in our office and we were all drinking after work hours and chatting. It was a group of around 10 people that stayed back. Mary was talking about how we both have been traveling together so much in the last year. She was teasing me for my habits while traveling, like always forgetting things in my hotel room, being sweaty and smelly when I join her for breakfast in the mornings, because I go to the hotel gym. Everyone was laughing, and she was making it sound like I was difficult to be around, all in good fun. I also told some funny and sweet stories about her, and agreed with her saying that I can be difficult to be with sometimes. Mary came to me and hugged me tightly and told me that she loves me, and I am her work husband. It was all innocent on the surface, but she might have been a bit drunk and just didn't let go of her tight hug. Also, I hate that phrase, as I do have a wife that I promise to be with forever and not just in non-working hours. After a few seconds, I started becoming uncomfortable and also saw a few people staring at us. So to diffuse the situation, I took her hands off my shoulder and told her she was my work sister, and that is why I love to annoy her so much. That seemed to have upset Mary, and she left and went back to her desk and was sobbing silently. I tried to apologize to her, but she told me how embarrassing the whole situation was. She said that she just meant work husband in a platonic way, but me calling her work sister made her sound like a creep in front of the whole office. She was also angry that I aggressively removed her hands from my shoulders while hugging. I tried to reason with her that I do not like the work husband phrase, and also people gave dirty looks when she said it. So I was just trying to make sure people do not misunderstand her words. We talked for a few minutes afterwards and Mary calmed down. She hugged me again and left. I felt really guilty afterwards because I can see Mary's point. I made her sound like a creep by implying that she meant something inappropriate when she called me her work husband. However, I was a bit uncomfortable in that situation and just did not want people to label us as such or assume something wrong. Am I the AH for calling Mary my work sister? I am sitting in my office writing this and a bit worried if I embarrassed Mary in front of everyone. Now for an update. Am I the idiot for calling my coworker work sister after she called me work husband in front of everyone? Aita, reddit.com. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the jerk. I think you were justified the whole time. Unfortunately, alcohol can make things awkward for everyone, but you were made uncomfortable by the extended hug, so you removing her arms from you was understandable. The problem is right now is that Mary is only considering her own feelings and not thinking at all about how her actions made you feel. She didn't think that such a public display of affection might make a married man uncomfortable. She is only thinking that you made her look like a creep. And let's be honest, she did kind of look like someone hitting on a married man after drinking too much. Comment 2. Nope, not the jerk, not even a smidge. Thank you for being one of the good guys, respecting your actual wife and shutting this nonsense down. She should be embarrassed by her behavior, and maybe this will help her learn to keep her hands off other people's spouses, or even just coworkers in general. I would take a step back from her though and not get played into comforting her or managing her feelings again. She's a grown woman and none of that is appropriate in the workplace. Now for the update. Thanks for reading my last post. So, a lot has happened since that incident at the happy hour. The day after the happy hour, things were a bit tense in the office. Mary was avoiding me and I could tell she was still upset. I tried to give her some space, thinking she might need time to cool off. However, by mid-morning, I decided to approach her and see if we could talk things out. I found her in the break room, and we had a brief but awkward conversation. She reiterated that she felt humiliated by my reaction and that she was just trying to be friendly. I apologized again, but it felt like my words were falling on deaf ears. Later that day, our boss called me into his office. Apparently, someone had reported the incident to HR, and they wanted to get my side of the story. I was shocked. I explained everything that happened, emphasizing that it was all in good fun until things got a bit uncomfortable. My boss seemed to understand, but he reminded me to be more mindful of how my actions could be perceived by others. It was a stern but fair warning. The next few days were a blur. Mary and I had to travel for a project, and the tension between us was obvious. We barely spoke during the trip, and when we did, it was strictly about work. It was a stark contrast to our usual camaraderie. I could tell she was still hurt, and it made the whole trip feel incredibly awkward. On the third day of our trip, something unexpected happened. We were having dinner at a local restaurant when Mary suddenly broke down in tears. She confessed that she had been going through a tough time personally and that my reaction at the happy hour had been the tipping point. She felt like she had lost a friend and that our relationship would never be the same. I was taken aback. I had no idea she was dealing with so much. I apologized again, this time with more sincerity, and promised to be more considerate in the future. We spent the rest of the evening talking about her struggles. She revealed that she was going through a rough patch in her marriage and that she had been feeling lonely and isolated. Her husband had been distant, and she felt like she had no one to turn to. I felt terrible for not noticing sooner. We talked for hours, and by the end of the night, it felt like we had made some progress in mending our friendship. When we returned to the office, things were still a bit awkward, but there was a noticeable improvement. Mary seemed more at ease, and we started to rebuild our rapport. However, the incident had left a mark on our relationship, and it was clear that things would never be quite the same. A few days later, I received an unexpected email from HR. They wanted to follow up on the incident and ensure that everything had been resolved. I assured them that Mary and I had talked things out and that we were working on rebuilding our friendship. They seemed satisfied with my response, but it was a reminder of how serious the situation had become. As the week went on, I started to notice some changes in Mary's behavior. She was more reserved and seemed to be keeping her distance from everyone, not just me. I couldn't help but wonder if the incident had affected her more deeply than she let on. I decided to give her some space and let her come to me if she needed to talk. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I ran into Mary's husband in the parking lot. He was waiting for her, and we struck up a conversation. He seemed like a nice guy, but there was an underlying tension in his demeanor. He mentioned that Mary had been distant lately and that he was worried about her. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and told him that she had been going through a tough time at work. He seemed to appreciate my honesty, but it was clear that there was more going on than I realized. The next day, Mary came to my desk and asked if we could talk. We went to a nearby coffee shop, and she opened up about her marriage troubles. She admitted that she had been feeling neglected and that her husband's behavior had been affecting her mental health. She thanked me for being there for her and for listening to her problems. It was a heartfelt conversation, and I felt a renewed sense of responsibility to be a better friend. As the week came to a close, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. The incident at the happy hour had been a wake-up call for both Mary and me. It made me realize how important it is to be mindful of other people's feelings and to be more considerate in my actions. It also highlighted the importance of communication and understanding in any relationship, whether it's with a coworker or a spouse. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for telling my narcissistic father to shove his 30,000 renovation plan? So my husband and I recently had a baby. We've been together for over 10 years. We have our own apartment. It's a little small, so we do eventually want to upgrade. My dad lives alone in a male 3-bedroom house which is fully paid off. He's semi-retired, retired early, and has a really good pension, but still works part-time. He's also a narcissistic functioning alcoholic. I have had a long history of issues with him, and if it wasn't for wanting a nicer place for the baby, I wouldn't even be considering this. He would love nothing more than to spend his days drinking and watching Netflix, but he has to work a bit still because his pension doesn't cover all his bills. Just 2 months ago, he was in the ICU for alcohol poisoning. Anyway, when my baby was born, he offered to let us move in so we would have more room and be able to have more money for the baby. He said we would take the top floor and he would have the basement with a kitchenette and bathroom. He said all he would want from us is to pay the utilities. I thought this was a way of him reaching out for help. If we lived there, then he would be able to see us and his grandbaby more often, and maybe he wouldn't be so lonely and drink so much. Well, fast forward to now, we discussed it more in depth, and he wants to do $30,000 worth of renovations to the basement before we move in, which he wants us to pay for in monthly payments once we move in, which, okay, fine, fair enough. Then he says he wants to stop working once we move in, and in 2 or 3 years, he may decide he wants to do something with his life, like travel the world and take out $30,000, $40,000 against the house to do so, at which point he would have to start charging us rent, amount unknown, to pay for that loan. Am I nuts, or does it sound like he wants us to fund his retirement and drinking? The whole point of us moving in was we would save money. Now we're basically going to be back to paying what we are in rent now, stuck in a house that we have no equity, in which he could literally sell at any point. I basically told him off because this is not how he first offered it to us, and he got pissed off and started screaming at me like he has since I was a kid, as if he offered us this great thing and we just pissed on it. I mean, if I was in his position and my kid was in my position with rent, house prices, the way they are, I wouldn't be charging them rent on top of utilities. The house is paid for. It's not like he would be supporting us whatsoever. We would be buying our own groceries, driving our own car, both working full-time, etc. So am I the jerk for refusing this great offer? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. Speaking as someone raised in a home with a drunk, I would have rather shared one tiny room with my mom and siblings than be anywhere near my house growing up. More space is not worth your child's mental health. It is not healthy for anyone to live in that environment, let alone a child. You won't be safe, especially financially, even physically if he drinks enough. I learned from experience that an alcoholic will choose his next drink over family. If his money runs out, he is going to take from you and even your child. My siblings and I had birthday money, babysitting money, etc., stolen by someone that was family. If they don't find money, they will take anything they can resell. Comment 2, you do not move yourself, your new baby, and your spouse into a house with a narcissistic, semi-functional alcoholic. What are you even thinking? Do you actually hear yourself saying that? I would stay in my tiny apartment for years and years as opposed to exposing my family to such a situation. No amount of money and extra room is worth that dysfunction. Never willingly live with a person in active addiction. Never. If you choose this, you will be the jerk of the universe ever. Your baby deserves so much more than daily life with an alcoholic. Now for the update. Hey everyone, a lot has happened since my last post. After the blow-up with my dad, my husband and I decided to stay in our apartment for the time being. We were both pretty stressed out about the whole situation, and it felt like the best thing to do was to take a step back and reassess. But then, about a month later, my dad called me out of the blue. He sounded different, almost desperate. He said he had been thinking a lot about what I said and wanted to make things right. He even suggested we meet up to discuss a new plan. I was skeptical, but agreed to meet him at a coffee shop. When we sat down, he apologized for his outburst and admitted that he had been drinking that day. He said he was willing to compromise and suggested that instead of us paying for the entire renovation, we could split the cost. He also promised not to take out any loans against the house without consulting us first. It sounded more reasonable, but I still had my doubts. We decided to give it another shot, but with some conditions. We drew up a written agreement outlining everything we discussed, including the split cost of the renovation and a clause that he couldn't take out any loans without our consent. My dad reluctantly agreed, and we all signed it. It felt like a step in the right direction, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something might go wrong. Fast forward another month, and we had started the renovation. Things were going smoothly until my dad lost his part-time job. He called me, panicking, saying he couldn't afford his bills and needed us to move in immediately to help with the utilities. This was a huge red flag for me. I felt like we were being manipulated again, but my husband and I decided to move in temporarily to help him out while we figured things out. Living with my dad was challenging, to say the least. He tried to stay sober, but there were days when I could tell he had been drinking. It was stressful for all of us, especially with a newborn in the house. My husband and I started to argue more, and it felt like the walls were closing in on us. We were stuck in a situation that was supposed to help us save money, but was instead draining us emotionally and financially. One night, things came to a head. My dad had been drinking heavily, and we got into a huge argument. He accused us of taking advantage of him and not appreciating his generosity. I was furious and told him that we were the ones being taken advantage of. The argument escalated, and my husband had to step in to calm things down. It was a breaking point for all of us. The next day, my dad apologized again and said he would go to rehab. He admitted that he couldn't control his drinking and needed help. It was a huge relief, but I was still wary. He had made promises before and broken them, but this time he seemed more sincere. He checked into a rehab facility a week later, and we decided to stay in the house while he was gone to see if things would improve. During his time in rehab, my husband and I had a lot of tough conversations. We realized that we needed to set boundaries and prioritize our family's well-being. We decided that if my dad came back and started drinking again, we would move out immediately, no matter what. It was a difficult decision, but we knew it was the right one. My dad completed his rehab program and came back home. He seemed like a different person, more focused and determined to stay sober. He started attending AA meetings and even got a new part-time job. Things were looking up, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We continued with the renovation, and my dad stuck to his promise of splitting the cost. As the months went by, our relationship with my dad improved. He was more involved with his grandchild and even started helping around the house. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. We were finally starting to see the benefits of living together. We saved money on rent, and my dad had the support he needed to stay sober. Looking back, I realized that the whole situation forced us to confront a lot of unresolved issues. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to give up. But in the end, it brought us closer together as a family. My dad still has his moments, but he's committed to staying sober, and we're committed to supporting him as long as he respects our boundaries. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.